So here's an engine that I worked on in the recent past, and this is the one, we've seen it in some other video footage of mine. This is the one that I managed to leave out the spacer on the drive side main bearings, and had to have the engine back and split it again and sort that out. But it went away complete and ready to go, and thankfully I take lots of photographs of all my engine work, and we can see there's no circlip in the piston on that side, and yet I've got a photograph clearly showing a circlip fitted and correctly located there, thankfully. But the owner also tells me that for whatever reason he's had the engine, the top end apart again, and done some work on it, and that he was the last one to handle the piston circlips. Well, whatever, there's no circlip in that piston, and we've got quite a sort of gouge in the bore. Let's see if I can light that up. There we are. Hopefully we can see that. Turn this torch down a notch, perhaps. You can see that. Maybe. Now, there's no circlip there. If there was a circlip there and it escaped, there's not a mark or blemish on that area of the piston, because the circlip would have to get past the piston, between the bore and the piston, and it would cause an awful mess on its way out, and there's nothing at all there. The gouging in the bore is very real and quite deep, and I think that that's possibly been caused by the gudgeon pin moving over if there were no circlip fitted, because I can't see that a circlip could have been fitted and escaped without making any hint of a mark on the piston there. So it'd be interesting to see what I find when I take the engine apart. I've got to take it right apart because there's play in the big end now, after all the work that was done previously, and no play felt in the big end. That suddenly decided to throw in the towel, so we've got to take it apart, get the crank out and actually split it this time and change the big end. But we've also got this top end issue to deal with here. I've got a replacement barrel and piston if needed, so that's not a biggie. But we get the engine apart, but I'm intrigued to know whether I'm going to find any trace of a circlip in the bottom of that engine, and whether it was actually sort of misplaced last time it was fitted in the piston, and it's actually sort of pinged out unnoticed and dropped into the works, and we'll find it down there, or maybe we won't see anything. But certainly the gudgeon pin, I think, is responsible for the marking in the bore. I don't think a circlip escaping has caused that, because there's just not a mark on that piston. So let's watch this space. I'll take the engine apart and we'll see what we've got fairly soon, hopefully. Okay, it's time to split these crankcases and see if we can see any sign of a circlip from the piston in there somewhere. Now, I've got the crankcases. When I put these together not that long ago, I put well seal on one side of the gasket and grease on the other, so I'm hoping that it might just split fairly easily. Make sure I've got all the bolts and things out of there. Looks like I have. Let's give it a go. Sometimes something like this helps you get started. Knock a little Stanley knife blade in somewhere where it doesn't matter if the gasket gets a little harmed, and might just be a chance of reusing the gasket further down the line if we need to. Got that one in there. I'll put the same down here. Goes this. Should have us on the move. I'll get it in here again. think that's letting go. Yes. Right, let's open up the cases if we can. See what there might be in there to find. There we go. Over a minute. There's some swarf in there, in that one. No sign of any circlip in that half. What about this half? Can't come out. They don't always slide out like this. Sometimes they can put up a fair fight. There we are, that's that one out. Oh, look what we got there. A circlip. Right. Well, I don't think that came down past the piston, no way. I think that's been dropped in there and worn away on that section by the flywheel or something rubbing on it. I just can't see how that could have got out of that piston without causing any marking on it, and there's none whatsoever on either side. You'd expect great big gouges down there, and there's nothing. So I think that perhaps somebody slipped when they were fitting that and it fell in, and then the gudgeon pin has been the cause of the gouging on the cylinder bore that we saw earlier. So that tells us where the circlip got to anyway, no doubt about that. There it is. You'll see that was in the bottom of the crankcase. So my next job is going to be split this crank. Obviously it came here because of the big end, and I'll have to see what, if anything, can be salvaged from that lot. Possibly the crank pin and maybe the conrod. Usually the floating bush is the first to fail, but we'll soon find out. So that solves the mystery of the circlip at least. Right, well, here we are with one 500 Indian Bullet engine back in kit form, and we've got the crank split now. We'll go out to the daylight and have a look at these components. The floating bush is worn out. How well the camera will pick this up and try and get as much light on it as I can. Should hopefully see it better than we would if we were in the workshop. It hasn't run dry. I tried blowing through the oil passageway in the timing side, through the timing side main shaft and into the crank pin when I had the drive side flywheel and the big end off, and I didn't feel that there was quite the sort of free flow of air through it that I was expecting. So whether the oil hole in the crank pin and that in the flywheel haven't quite been lined up. I didn't notice any debris or obstructions in there. There was nothing actually sort of gone in there to block it, but I just felt that there might have been a bit more free flow of air through the oil feed to the big end. But it wasn't blocked and it wasn't dry, and you can see it's had a bit of a beating there. This one, the white metal's actually started to break up and flake off as well as being worn out, so, which is strange. You know, it's not that long ago I had this engine apart, and although I wasn't asked to split the crank, I couldn't detect any play in the big end, but it must have been right on the threshold of starting to fail. The crank pin looks alright. There's evidence there obviously of it being used, but there's no real perceptible wear on it. That could be good to go again, or the owner might prefer it if I fit a new one. I'll discuss that with him. And the outer race in the conrod, as is more often than not the case, is probably fit for further use, because they rarely suffer when a big end fails, unless the big end gets so badly worn and beaten up that things get hot and start bluing, and then they can do, but that one's alright. So at the very least we might get away with a new floating bush, or for a little extra peace of mind, a new crank pin as well. But that's what I found in there, and obviously the circlip, which I've already covered. So not too many bits needed to sort it out and put it back together, and then obviously I'll have to reassemble the crank and true it and whatever, and then the bottom end can all go back together once more.